lowering your standard to admit somebody of a socioeconomic status or race would not help them do that. In fact, it would harm their graduation rate and excellence.
Well, as the case also points out, the standard isn't necessarily lowered because students are all admitted. The question is whether race can be an added consideration, a tipping point in some of these cases.
The standard is lowered.
The
standard is lowered as the student premier admissions data shows. An Asian has to score 273 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a black person. So the standard is lowered for black Americans.
Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and we're going to get a masterclass on truth bombs shutting down a woke CNN reporter.
And I want to bring in now Kenny Xu, president of Color Us United, a group that advocates against affirmative action. He's also a member of the board for Students for Fair Admissions. That's the group that brought this case against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. Kenny, thank you for joining us. So today's ruling obviously is one that you were hoping for, arguing that the rules in place that support affirmative action were unfair to Asian Americans. So from a practical perspective, how does today's decision help Asian American students looking to get into elite colleges?
I just want to say I'm ecstatic about this decision. It means that Asian Americans can finally get treated on their merits. Guys, we know why Asian Americans should get into Harvard at disproportionate rates. It's because they study twice as many hours as the average American. It's not because of their race. It's because of their culture. It's because of their family values. Academic excellence, that should be prioritized. Those should be the values that schools like Harvard and Chapel Hill, supposedly elite schools and academic programs, should be valuing in an applicant, not race.
You heard today President Biden expressing some concerns over socioeconomic factors and inequality being made worse given this decision. He also presented what he called basically a way forward. I wonder if you take race out of the picture and you do what the president is suggesting, taking socioeconomic status into consideration, do you think that that would be fair to Asian American students as well?
No, I don't. I think that admissions should be only based on merit. And the reason why is because why are we asking a university to calculate somebody's level of adversity? I think that sets a very bad precedent for anybody trying to get into college. We should be treated on the basis of our merits. We should be treated on the basis of how hard we work, our study, our SAT scores, our grades. A name-blind, race-blind process is what I would advocate for as president of Color Us United.
Kenny, can I ask you, though? I mean, colleges, obviously, they care about grades and SAT scores, but they also are filling universities of people, human beings, who have other factors that they bring to the table. Why is it not okay for them to consider those things?
I'm saying if you're going to consider those things, you should consider them without respect to race.
Sure.
So as you know, a lot of Asian Americans.
I think that's exactly right. But socioeconomic status doesn't. If you take race out of it, let's call it socioeconomic status, where whether or not they grew up wealthy or poor, is that not something that colleges might have an interest in considering?
The reason why you shouldn't consider that is because you should consider the success of an applicant. Because of affirmative action, Black Americans graduate from law school at the bottom 25% of their classes, largely speaking. And we don't want that. We want Black students to succeed. We want every student to succeed, low-income students to succeed. But you have to put them in scenarios, in places where they're likely to succeed. And lowering your standard to admit somebody of a socioeconomic status or race would not help them do that. In fact, it would harm their graduation rate and excellence.
Well, as the case also points out, the standard isn't necessarily lowered because students are all admitted. The question is whether race can be an added consideration, a tipping point in some of these cases.
The standard is lowered.
The
standard is lowered as the student premier admissions data shows. An Asian has to score 273 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a Black person. So the standard is lowered for Black Americans.
Kenny Xu, thank you for your perspective. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Hey gang, you're seeing the headlines. Endless war, $31 trillion in debt, $4.7 trillion in new proposed taxes. This Biden fiasco just won't stop. Now they're hiring thousands of new gun-carrying IRS agents in all 50 states. I wonder what for. The truth is, things could get a whole lot worse if you're not protected. And that's why we partnered with the top-rated precious metals company in the entire country, Goldco. They've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. You heard that right. They're absolutely amazing. Click on that link below right now. And for those with retirement accounts, the patriots over at Goldco are offering up to $10,000 in free silver when opening a qualified IRA account. And for cash buyers, you're going to love this. You can get bonus silver just for making a purchase. If you buy $15,000 worth of precious metals, you get $750 in bonus silver. If you buy $25,000, you get over $1,200 worth of bonus silver. But that's only as long as supply lasts, so don't wait. Click on that link below. This is your opportunity to protect yourself from our out-of-control corrupt government by guarding your assets with what patriots have invested in for centuries, the timeless value of gold and silver. Click on that link below right now. Now, that was Kenny Xu. We've actually had Kenny on as a guest for our live Courageous Patriots Insiders Club, which you could sign up for by clicking on the link below. He's absolutely amazing. And he's absolutely right in his truth bombs there. What I love about what Kenny just did is he demonstrated irrefutably how affirmative action doesn't just discriminate against Asian Americans. I mean, it clearly does. We have the data at Harvard. A black student in the 40th percentile, so literally below average in their academic index, is more likely to get into Harvard than an Asian student in the 100th percentile. Black students in the 50th percentile, an average student, right smack in the middle, were more likely to get in than white students who were towards the top of their academic percentile. So that's clearly unfair racial discrimination against Asians, non-blacks. But not only that, the genius of Kenny's argument is he actually showed how affirmative action hurts black Americans. Affirmative action doesn't just discriminate, it's actually detrimental to the very population it claims to help. The Stanford economist Thomas Sowell, who is himself black, has revealed data that shows that affirmative action actually has had the inadvertent consequence of actually increasing college dropout rates. In fact, when black kids who are mismatched into schools via affirmative action, they're more likely to end up at the bottom of their class. Sowell found that 25% of all the black kids were on academic probation when he was a Cornell University professor. And as it turns out, it's because they were accepted on the basis of affirmative action, not because of their SAT scores or their study habits. And the key here is that they could have been at the top of a school that was much more of a match with their academic abilities, but instead they were put into a collegiate context where they were completely in over their heads and were disproportionately more likely to drop out, as any of us would. Here's Thomas Sowell dropping these truth bombs before a Senate Judiciary Committee.
Now, do you believe that mandatory proportional representation benefits minorities?
No. In fact, I think one of the great handicaps that blacks and other minorities face across the country is that they are systematically mismatched with universities in the admissions process. That is, if Harvard feels that it must have X percent of blacks, and if the pool is such that they can't get X percent of blacks at the same level as the rest of the Harvard students, they're going to take those blacks who would have succeeded in some state university and bring them to Harvard, where many of them will fail. Or MIT is a better example, that the average black student at MIT is in the bottom 10% of MIT students in math. But he is in the top 90% of all American students in math, because MIT students are so phenomenal in mathematics. Something like 1/4 of all the black students going to MIT do not graduate. You're talking about a pool of people who score at the 90th percentile in math, whom you are artificially turning into failures by mismatching them with the school. Back in much earlier, you had a great increase of blacks in the universities through the GI Bill. You had nothing like that kind of attrition from that process, because the student went wherever he could be accepted, wherever he met the normal standards, and the government simply paid the money.
You know, it would be one thing if these woke leftists actually acknowledged this, that they came out and said, yeah, we know, you're right. there is definitely an inadvertent consequence of affirmative action, but we're taking steps to mitigate it, or perhaps even, yeah, but that's a consequence we're willing to live with. You know, I can handle that, right? It's still wrong, but at least the truth of reality is being acknowledged. That's not what the woke left does. You have liberal leftists out there actually denying the data. They actually deny the frankly obvious, that if people are getting accepted into collegiate contexts that their academic credentials simply aren't qualified for, precisely because they got in for reasons other than those credentials, then obviously they're going to suffer. It's not going to be an academic experience they're well matched to. And of course, we've got the data to prove that. So Kenny Xu just dropped truth bomb after truth bomb with regard to affirmative action. Asians are clearly getting discriminated against. Standards are clearly being lowered demonstrably for blacks. And blacks disproportionately end up at the bottom of their classes in places like Harvard and are far more likely to drop out. The days of affirmative action are mercifully over, and we have awesome patriots like Kenny Xu and Thomas Sowell to thank. Hey gang, I know what it's like to feel alone out there in these turbulent times, but I broke free. If you too have been looking for a community with like-minded patriots who are serious about resisting globalism, building a parallel economy, and having intelligent and deep fellowship on a regular basis, then you've come to the right place. In my Courageous Patriot Insiders community, we're building a close-knit movement of, by, and for patriots who are breaking free from the outrage and despair cycles of the mainstream media and taking on the fight against globalism. Every week, I deep dive into the content I can't share on big tech and give you the cliff notes on the truth of how patriots just like you are building up their communities, starting patriot businesses, and fighting the woke in both public and private. All with a few history and political lessons from yours truly, of course. If you want to stop feeling alone as a patriot and stand together with this fast-growing community, be sure to click on the link in the description below. Don't wait. Join me and my Patriot Coalition today, and let's get fighting.